the decision that could save Quando Rondo's life. Quando Rondo did something that may have been more dangerous than any song, any beef, or any public confrontation he had ever faced. He looked at the street identity that helped define his name and decided he wanted out. Not halfway out, not quietly distancing himself while still claiming the same loyalty. He publicly made it clear that he was done with the life and relationships he believed had stopped protecting him. And when a man who spent years representing loyalty suddenly starts talking like loyalty itself became the threat, you have to ask one question. What happened behind the scenes that made staying feel more dangerous than leaving? For years, Quando's name was connected to street culture almost as closely as it was connected to music. Fans watched him rise from Savannah, Georgia, turn pain into records, build a national audience, and become one of the most recognizable melodic voices from his generation of street rap. But fame never separated him from the world that shaped him. If anything, success made every conflict louder, every alliance more visible, and every enemy more aware of where he stood. Then everything began collapsing. After the deadly 2020 confrontation connected to King Von, Quando found himself living under a level of attention that went far beyond normal rap controversy. The tension did not disappear when the headlines slowed down. It followed him, and in 2022, that danger became painfully real when gunfire erupted around Quando in Los Angeles and his cousin Lul Pab lost his life. According to authorities, Quando was believed to have been the intended target. That moment appears to have changed something inside him permanently. Soon afterward, Quando publicly announced that he was distancing himself from the Rolling 60s. Even more explosive, he made accusations, suggesting that people he once trusted may have betrayed him and helped expose his location. Those specific claims have not been proven in court, but the fact that Quando believed them was powerful enough to reshape how he talked about loyalty, family, survival, and his future. And that is where this story becomes bigger than rap. Because Quando was no longer asking how to protect his reputation, he seemed to be asking how to protect his life. Over the next chapters, we are going back to Savannah, through the rise, the tragedy, the allegations, the federal cases, the loss of Lul Pab, and the spiritual transformation that pushed Quando toward a completely different path. But before we go deeper, I want to know where you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. If you believe Quando was right to choose peace and walk away from that lifestyle, come on. If you think the past will always follow him no matter what he does, come on, do it. And subscribe to the channel. Because the next chapter explains how Savannah created both the rapper and the identity he would eventually try to escape. Savannah made him before the industry did. Long before the platinum records, the viral headlines, and the controversies that would follow his name across the country. Quando Rondo was Tykrem Bowman, a kid growing up in Savannah, Georgia, surrounded by an environment where survival often came before ambition. His story did not begin inside a recording studio. It began in a world where consequences arrived early, and where the streets could shape a young person long before that person fully understood what those choices might cost. As a teenager, Quando spent time in juvenile detention and later county jail. After another period behind bars, he began taking music seriously. That decision would change his life. Instead of allowing his surroundings to write the entire ending for him, he started turning what he had experienced into songs. And people listened. In 2018, I Remember, featuring Lil Baby, helped introduce Quando to a much larger audience. His melodic delivery, emotional pain, and street-centered storytelling gave him something listeners immediately recognized as authentic. More songs followed. His audience grew. His debut album, Q-Puck, eventually reached the Billboard 200, and his association with NBA YoungBoy connected him to one of the most passionate fan bases in modern rap. From the outside, it looked like the escape story was already happening. But there was another identity growing beside the music. Quando had publicly represented his connection to the Rolling 60s neighborhood Crips, and that affiliation became woven into his image. It appeared in the way he spoke, the way he carried himself, and the way audiences understood his authenticity. In a genre where street credibility can become part of an artist's brand, that identity seemed to strengthen his reputation. But every identity comes with expectations. The more successful Quando became, the harder it was to separate the artist from the world that had helped shape him. Music was giving him money, recognition, and opportunity, while street loyalty was tying him to relationships and conflicts that success could not simply erase. That contradiction would eventually become the center of his entire story, because Quando Rondo was climbing toward everything he had wanted. But he was also carrying an identity that would follow him into rooms money could open, but could never fully protect. And by 2020, those two worlds were about to collide in a way that would change his name forever. The night that changed everything, November 9, 2020, became the date that divided Quando Rondo's life into a before and an after. Outside the Monaco Hookah Lounge in Atlanta, members of Quando's circle and King Von's circle became involved in a physical confrontation. What happened next unfolded quickly, and the consequences would extend far beyond anyone standing outside that building. Gunfire erupted. King Von was fatally wounded. Quando's associate, Lul Pab, was later arrested and charged in connection with Von's death. Those charges were eventually dismissed in 2023, with prosecutors determining that the shooting amounted to self-defense, but the legal outcome could not erase what had already happened culturally. King Von was one of Chicago rap's most closely followed young artists. His death created grief, anger, speculation, and division across hip-hop. Almost instantly, surveillance footage circulated online. Social media dissected every second. Foncho's sides. Rap commentary channels replayed the event endlessly, and Quando Rondo became inseparable from the conversation. He was not simply another rapper involved in controversy anymore. To many people, his name became emotionally connected to the death of an artist they loved. Quando later addressed the situation through music, including End of Story. But no record could control the reaction that followed. The internet had already transformed a tragic confrontation into a permanent cultural conflict. That is where fame became something different for Quando. Before that night, attention meant streams, shows, interviews, and recognition. After that night, attention could also mean danger. Every public appearance carried a different weight. Every post could be interpreted as a message. Every lyric could be analyzed as a response. And every rumor had the potential to restart the tension. The most important part of this chapter is not deciding which fan base was right or wrong. It is understanding what happens when grief, reputation, social media, and street loyalty collide at the same time, because those forces rarely stay online. For Quando, November 2020 became the beginning of a period where controversy was no longer just affecting his career. It was becoming part of how he had to think about survival itself. And 2 years later, the danger everyone had been discussing from a distance would arrive frighteningly close to him. Fame could not protect him from the fallout. After King Von's death, Quando Rondo continued making music. But the environment around him had changed. The tension did not disappear when the biggest headlines moved on. It remained underneath everything. For fans, rap conflicts can feel distant. People watch interviews, debate lyrics, choose sides in comment sections, and move to the next story. But for the artists actually living inside those situations, there is no button that closes the screen. Quando had become one of the most recognizable names connected to one of hip-hop's most emotionally charged tragedies. That meant every movement could attract attention. Every city mattered. Every person around him mattered. And every assumption about loyalty suddenly carried more weight. This is where the contradiction in Quando's career became impossible to ignore. The same fame that gave him access to money, hotels, vehicles, security, and opportunity also made his location, his relationships, and his movements more visible. Success could buy comfort. It could not guarantee safety. For nearly 2 years, the shadow of November 2020 remained attached to his name. Online hostility continued. Street speculation continued. The emotional connection between King Von, Otif, Quando, and the people surrounding them remained part of rap conversation. Then came August 19. Leontiling Arshar. Quando was in Los Angeles with members of his circle, including his cousin Savion Robinson, widely known as Lul Pab. They stopped near the Beverly Center. It should have been an ordinary moment. Instead, according to the account presented in the source, masked attackers approached and opened fire toward the vehicle carrying Quando's group. Everything that had existed as tension, rumor, and fear suddenly became real in seconds. Quando survived. His sister survived, but Lul Pab did not, and from that moment forward, the story stopped being about whether Quando could handle controversy. It became about whether he could continue living inside the world that controversy had created around him, because fame may change where you sleep, what you drive, and how many people know your name. But when danger finds you anyway, all of those advantages can suddenly feel meaningless. For Quando, the price of the conflict was about to become painfully personal. The day Lul Pab's death changed everything. There are moments that damage a career, and then there are moments that change the way a person sees life itself. For Quando Rondo, the death of Lul Pab appears to have been the second kind. Lul Pab was not simply someone standing near Quando because of rap business. He was family. He was Quando's cousin, and someone who had been part of his life long before the world became obsessed with headlines, affiliation, and rap conflicts. According to the source, the attack happened in Los Angeles in broad daylight. Gunfire was directed toward the vehicle, carrying Quando and members of his group. Quando was not physically struck, but Lul Pab suffered fatal injuries. Videos from the aftermath spread online, capturing Quando in visible distress as the reality of what had happened unfolded around him. That image told a story no diss record ever could. A man who had spent years around street culture was suddenly watching someone he loved pay the price for violence that had reached directly into his own life. The source describes authorities as believing Quando was the intended target of the attack. If that assessment was correct, the psychological weight becomes even heavier. Someone close to him died during an attack apparently meant for him. There is no victory inside that realization. No reputation makes it easier. No amount of streaming numbers changes the outcome. And no argument about who represented what side can bring a person back. After Lul Pab's death, Quando posted emotional messages about his cousin. The words were brief, but the meaning behind them was enormous. Grief does not always arrive in long speeches. Sometimes a few words carry everything a person cannot explain. This is the point where Quando's story began changing direction. Before Los Angeles, street loyalty could still be discussed as identity, reputation, or belonging. After Los Angeles, loyalty had a body count attached to it in his own personal world. And once someone experiences that kind of loss, the old equations can stop making sense. What exactly was the lifestyle giving him, and what was it taking away? For Quando, those questions were no longer philosophical. They were standing directly in front of him, and his next decision would shock many of the same people who had watched him represent that identity for years. When loyalty turned into suspicion, after Lul Pab's death, Quando Rondo did something few people expected him to do publicly. He began distancing himself from the street affiliation that had been part of his identity for years. Quando announced that he was laying his flag down and separating himself from the Rolling 60s. His statements suggested deep frustration with people he once viewed as allies. The message was not simply that he wanted fewer problems. It sounded like he no longer trusted the foundation the loyalty had been built on. Then came the accusation that made the situation even more explosive. Quando publicly suggested that people connected to his own circle had betrayed him and helped expose his location in California. That claim must be treated carefully. The source specifically notes that no Rolling 60s member had been charged or convicted for leaking Quando's location. His claim remained an allegation, not a proven fact, but psychologically, something else matters. Quando appeared to believe it, and if he genuinely believed people he once considered brothers could have played some role in putting him in danger, then leaving was no longer about changing an image. It was about survival. Street loyalty often presents itself as unconditional. You represent the same people, protect the same circle, and expect that the loyalty will be returned when life becomes dangerous. But what happens when someone begins questioning whether that protection was ever real? For Quando, The death of Lul Pab appears to have destroyed whatever confidence remained. He began speaking about choosing himself, his family, and his future. That is a dramatic reversal for someone whose public identity had been built partly around belonging to something larger than himself. And it created a new problem. Walking away does not automatically make the history disappear. People remember old alliances. People remember old conflicts. And people do not instantly forget years of public symbolism because someone announces that they are finished with it. Quando could change what he wanted next. He could not control how everyone else interpreted his past. And while the streets were debating whether his decision represented wisdom, fear, betrayal, or maturity, federal investigators were building a case that would reveal just how serious the alleged plot against him had become. The federal case changed the entire picture. For years, much of the conversation surrounding Quando Rondo existed in the world of rap rumors, social media theories, and street speculation. Then federal prosecutors entered the picture, and suddenly, some parts of the story were no longer being discussed, only on YouTube channels or Instagram pages. According to the federal allegations described in the source, individuals associated with OTF traveled from Chicago to Los Angeles before the August 2022 attack and followed Quando's movements through the city. Prosecutors alleged that the operation was connected to a murder-for-hire conspiracy targeting Quando in retaliation for King Von's death. Lil Durk was later charged in connection with the alleged conspiracy. That distinction matters. These are allegations within an ongoing criminal case, not a final determination of guilt. A charge is not the same thing as a conviction, and everyone accused is entitled to the legal process. But the allegations nevertheless changed the public understanding of what Quando had been living through. What many people had treated as generalized rap beef was now being described by federal authorities as something organized, financed, and deliberate. According to the prosecution theory summarized in the source, travel, vehicles, and other resources were allegedly connected to the attempt to locate and target Quando. When federal arrests followed in 2024, Quando was identified as the target of the alleged plot, not as a defendant in that case. That detail reframed the story. For years, viewers had mostly discussed Quando as one of the central personalities surrounding the King Von tragedy. Now the federal case presented him in another role, a man allegedly being hunted because of that history. That does not erase his past. It does not resolve the arguments surrounding everything that happened in 2020. But it shows how dangerous unresolved cycles of retaliation can become when nobody finds a way to stop them. And perhaps that helps explain why Quando's public language began changing. The man who once seemed willing to carry street identity everywhere was increasingly talking about peace. He had experienced loss. He believed he had experienced betrayal. He was facing consequences from his own choices. And now, federal allegations suggested that the danger surrounding him had reached an entirely different level. At some point, survival requires more than avoiding the next confrontation. Sometimes it requires becoming someone who no longer wants the confrontation at all. Quando started looking for peace. The most unexpected chapter in Quando Rondo's story did not begin with another beef, it began with faith. In the years following Lul Pab's death and Quando's public decision to distance himself from his former street identity, fans began noticing a different tone. The aggressive symbolism that had once been closely connected to his public image started becoming less central. Quando began speaking openly about Islam. He talked about peace. He talked about energy. He talked about getting serious about his deen. That transformation matters because it represented more than changing vocabulary. In the context of the life Quando had been describing, embracing a disciplined religious framework meant reconsidering how he handled pride, conflict, accountability, and the future. According to comments cited in the source, Quando said Islam gave him peace and some of the best energy he had experienced. He also expressed a desire to move beyond the conflict connected to Lil Durk, pointing to the fact that families and communities depended on them. That was a radically different message from the cycle that had surrounded both names for years. Of course, public transformation always attracts skepticism. Some people will see genuine growth. Others will see someone changing only because the consequences became too serious to ignore. And nobody watching from the outside can perfectly measure what is happening inside another person. But transformation does not have to erase the past in order to matter. Sometimes its first sign is simply recognizing that repeating the past will eventually destroy whatever remains. Quando had already lost someone he loved. He had lived under intense public hostility. He had experienced the fear associated with being targeted, and he had begun questioning relationships he once considered permanent. Maybe peace became attractive because chaos had finally shown him its full price. But there was one major obstacle between Quando and any clean new beginning. His own legal problems had not disappeared. While he was trying to reshape the direction of his life, federal prosecutors were pursuing a separate case based on conduct connected to his past. The streets were not the only thing Quando needed to leave behind. He also had to face accountability for choices that had already been made. You can change direction, but the past still has a bill. Quando Rondo may have wanted a different future, but wanting change does not erase consequences. In December 2023, federal authorities arrested him in a drug case in Georgia. The original indictment included serious allegations involving a drug distribution, conspiracy, and multiple defendants. Prosecutors also alleged that Quando held a leadership role connected to the Rolling 60s, but the case eventually narrowed. According to the source, Quando reached a plea agreement in 2024 and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to possess and distribute marijuana. In December of that year, he was sentenced to 33 months in federal prison, followed by supervised release, and ordered to pay a financial penalty. For someone publicly talking about leaving street life behind, prison created a painful contradiction. He could decide that he no longer wanted to live the same way. The justice system could still hold him responsible for conduct that came before that decision. And that is one of the most important lessons in this entire story. Change can affect tomorrow. It does not rewrite yesterday. Quando turned himself in during January 2025 and began serving his sentence at FCI Edgefield. The source later describes another significant development. After approximately 15 months in custody, his sentence was reduced. And in May 2026, he transitioned into community confinement, overseen through a residential reentry structure. That was not full freedom. Restrictions remained, rules remained, supervision remained, but symbolically, it represented movement. For the first time in years, Quando's story was not moving toward another confrontation, another tragedy, or another arrest. It was moving toward reintegration. His projected full release date, according to the source, is November 11, 2026. That date represents more than leaving federal custody. It represents a test, because escaping prison is one thing. Escaping the habits, relationships, identity, and emotional patterns that help bring you there can be much harder. When Quando finally receives complete freedom, the most important question will not be whether he can return to music. He has already proven he can make records. The real question will be whether he can build a life where success no longer depends on staying connected to the same forces that nearly destroyed it. That is what makes the final chapter of Quando Rondo's story so important. It is no longer about whether he survived. It is about what he chooses to do with survival. Can Quando Rondo really become someone new? When you zoom out, Quando Rondo's story does not look like a normal rap career. It looks like a warning about what happens when talent, fame, street identity, and grief, loyalty, retaliation, and accountability become impossible to separate. He went from juvenile detention in Savannah to platinum records and national attention. He became closely identified with street culture while building a career capable of taking him far beyond it. Then one night in Atlanta changed everything. The death of King Von created consequences that followed Quando for years. 2 years later, violence reached him again in Los Angeles. And this time Lul Pab, someone Quando loved, did not survive. That appears to have been the moment when the equation finally changed. What good is loyalty if it cannot protect the people beside you? What good is reputation if maintaining it means living in fear? What good is winning an argument if everyone involved keeps losing people? Quando's later decisions suggest that he started asking those questions himself. He publicly distanced himself from his old affiliation. He spoke about feeling betrayed, although those specific betrayal claims have not been proven in court. He embraced Islam and began talking about peace. He expressed a desire to move beyond old conflicts. Then he faced his own federal case pleaded guilty, served time, and entered the difficult process of returning to society. None of that automatically makes Quando a hero. Transformation should not mean pretending previous choices never mattered. Real growth requires accountability, but accountability and redemption are not opposites. A person can acknowledge the damage connected to the past while still deciding not to repeat it, and that may be the biggest lesson in this entire story. Street conflict often survives because every loss creates pressure for another response. One person gets hurt, another person feels obligated to answer, and eventually, nobody remembers what winning was supposed to look like. Breaking that cycle can appear weak to people still trapped inside it. In reality, choosing not to create another funeral may require more courage than continuing a conflict. Everyone already knows how to continue. Quando Rondo cannot control everything attached to his name. He cannot undo November 2020. He cannot bring Lul Pab back. He cannot erase his conviction, but he can control what he builds next. And if November 2026 truly becomes the beginning of a different chapter, the most powerful thing Quando could prove would not be that he survived the streets. It would be that the streets no longer control the man he becomes. Now I want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? If you believe Quando Rondo is genuinely trying to turn his life around, come on, If you believe his past will continue following him no matter how much he changes, come on, dude. Keep the conversation respectful, because real lives and real families are connected to this story. If you want more deep dives into the biggest stories shaping hip-hop, subscribe to the channel, hit like to share this video, and drop your number in the comments.